All right, all right. Our hood, protecting the hood. Language is an index of culture. It is routinely used by immigrant groups to mark and close their communities. Language is a unifying element, and it allows native speakers to do business within the community while limiting others. It brings status and importance to the people, culture, and the community. Visitors to Chinatown, Koreatown, Little Saigon, and any other culturally strong communities might feel some discomfort because they do not speak the language. Others often feel resentful because they feel this is America and everyone should be speaking English, the national language. Public laws in some cities, such as Miami, require that all public announcements be in both English and Spanish. Most of the public notices, business signs, newspapers, and advertisements are in Spanish. Immigrant enclaves, like the Hispanic and Asian communities of today, are very much aware that they are marking and closing their communities. Cubans are an example of a group that used language to mark and close their community and to gain competitive advantages. The first major influx of Cubans began to arrive in this country in the late 1960s. They soon acquired major control of both the private and public sectors of Dade County and Miami, Florida. In one of their first acts of power, they enacted a city ordinance that declared Miami a bilingual city. Non Spanish speaking people had to learn Spanish to interact with the Cuban communities. Millions of dollars are now embarked to print public information both English and Spanish. Even the Miami Herald publishes a daily newspaper that is primarily bilingual. Most business and public jobs require a facility with Spanish. Blacks who previously held most of the hotel and lower level city jobs were fired because they do not speak Spanish. Cubans and others demanded bilingual education classes to all students while using the Spanish language to mark and close their communities. Since blacks do not have an official language, they cannot use language to mark and close their communities to competing groups. The language disadvantage of blacks was revealed in the Ebonics issue in Oakland, California, toward the end of the 1990s. The local school board had requested federal bilingual funds to teach English to black children who spoke Ebonics. Not only were they turned down at the federal level, they incurred the wrath of many blacks and black leaders who saw no value in recognizing black language. The Oakland debacle illustrates the bigger problem blacks face. If they had maintained their communities, built a business structure that provided their people jobs and wealth building opportunities, their children could have had the same opportunities accorded ethnic immigrants. They could have remained in their communities for the rest of their lives speaking Ebonics or any other language of their choosing. Instead, black children are required to meet the language standards of immigrant communities because they are the largest if not the only group of Americans who regularly abandon their own people and communities to live with other groups in their communities. Black communities are vulnerable and unmarked. They do not have gates, signs, or other markers or barriers. They are wide open to transit traffic and activities from outsiders. Open black communities are prime targets for those who wish to exploit blacks economically and politically. Politically. Unclosed black communities are vulnerable to toxic waste and illegal activities such as drugs, prostitution, fencing, and gambling. The black residents are not sufficiently organized to deal with these illegal activities, which are typically controlled by powerful forces outside of black communities. Open communities cannot control the goods and services within them. Competing groups can enter, confiscate, and exploit the host community. They can control black politicians, start competitive businesses that drain off capital, sell inferior products, or commit acts that are injurious to the local residents. A residential neighborhood cannot protect or sustain itself until it becomes a functional community. Levels of a functional community. Once we have put together the elements for a functional community, an independent economy, a code of conduct and form of government, our team now has a different okay. Our team now has a foundation from which to compete politically and economically. We become more familiar with each other and can rally around our collective needs, experiences, and goals. We can now begin to move our communities to higher levels of functioning as illustrated in Figure 10 below. Okay, Figure 10 below. Group accountability, group cooperation, group trust, functional community. Or functional community, group trust, functional community, group trust, group cooperation, group accountability. The key to empowerment, ordering of a community. Okay, all right. And our paradigm of vertical integration can be applied to community development. Vertical community development establishes a common sense of direction, authority, and collective interest. Members of the community live by a code of conduct based upon principles that dictate how they relate to, care for, respect, and support each other. Once people have confidence that others in the community have relied upon, okay, once people have confidence that others in the community can be relied upon to help and support them, a sense of mutual trust evolves and cooperation can follow. Humans cooperate with people they have learned to trust. Once people are cooperating, then they have the capability to hold members of the group accountable for their behavior. All members of a community cannot be relied upon to live by a code of conduct alone. Some will undermine and sell out the community. They will not contribute to its collective development by or support blackness. They will not contribute to its collective development or support blackness. A functional community must have a means to protect itself and to hold its members accountable. Other groups have always had formal and informal mechanisms to reward or punish members of the group who intentionally engage in behavior that is inappropriate or injurious to the community. Black America must have must have some institutional community organizations that will hold members accountable to the code of conduct. With the community developing trust, cooperation, and accountability, as indicated in Figure 10, black people will be able to function as a competitive team in the marketplace. Conclusion: the success of our national empowerment plan, to a great degree, depends upon our ability to build, mark, and close physical communities and develop mindsets that connect us to one another. Integration destroys communities, it does not build them. Community building is organized around people with common goals who appreciate and recognize each member's contribution to the overall group goals. A competitive community is one that operates upon competitive advantages. A competitive community is one that operates upon competitive advantages. Within our national network, we must build competitive communities that contain social, political, economic, religious, educational, and geographic assets that act as foundations of power. Communities are repositories for black assets. The Powernomics National Plan offers research and strategies to build functional communities. But the work of implementing the strategies is necessary to a is necessary. Okay, okay. The Powernomics National Plan offers research and strategies to build functional communities, but the work of implementing the strategies is necessarily a local function. Is necessarily a local function. Okay? Okay. Some neighborhoods will be able to use out of the box thinking and mobilize for change. Others will talk about what they should do and not progress. And not progress much beyond discussions. Some neighborhoods and communities will never even get to the discussion stage. Each black neighborhood should articulate a common set of beliefs and values regarding taking business risk, making commitment to savings and investment, striving to achieve uniformly uniformly high educational standards, abiding by a code of personal and group conduct, and supporting a trust system, a team spirit, ethos, and group self-interest. The primary obligation of a community is to equip its members to live and compete successfully in the domestic and global society of today and tomorrow. Those community members who are able to make this work will become the new black leaders because they will know how to apply the Powernomics vision in order to achieve black empowerment. Chapter 4: Restructuring schools for group competitiveness. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. He will find his proper place and stand in it. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to to worry about his actions. Hmm. He will find his proper place and stand in it. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, 1933. The traditional role of schools for black children must be changed in order to make them functional and relevant in the lives of black Americans. Black schools must empower black children by functioning as extensions of the family, teaching the realities of life, dispensing knowledge, and honing skills. It is from these collective school experiences that black children learn to perceive the world and their place in it as individuals as well as members of a race of people. Schools have yet to perform these tasks. Changing black schools into what they should be will require major restructuring. Restructuring black schools will require more than just tinkering with a few programs. We will need our schools to produce children who are appropriately trained to implement the Powernomics plan in our communities, in our economic development, politics, and in our churches. Clearly, it will be necessary to make changes in what and how our children are taught. The new instructional programs and proposed solutions must be based upon the realistic needs and socioeconomic problems of black children. If our problem is that our race inculcates values of individualism that hurt our people, then schools must design a solution to that problem. If our problem is that adults in our race feel successful only when they work in white corporations, then our schools must devise a solution and instill new values in the children. At the bottom line, as we black people must accept full responsibility for the quality of education our black children receive. At bottom line, we as black people must accept full responsibility for the quality of education our black children receive. There are few, if any, incentives for the majority of society to operate black schools that prepare children to compete in the economy. White society has a monopoly of control over the power of schools, and much of that power is hostile to our interests and opposed to our advancement. All right. All right. Black America and its schools. Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, in The Miseducation of the Negro, blacks are the only group of people who take their most precious possessions, their children, and ask their oppressors to educate them and mold and shape their minds. Today, blacks are totally dependent upon the majority of society to prepare black children to compete with white children. White control of black schools presents a conflict of interest for the majority white society whose primary interest is in its own children. As long as black people continue to wait on white society to educate their children, they will be waiting for a long time. They will be waiting for a long time. Black America must educate its children through community-based partnerships between students, teachers, parents, children, churches, and businesses. Black America must educate its children through community-based partnerships between students, teachers, parents, churches, and businesses. The same building, the same building principles that were useful in Rebuilding our communities can be applied to schools, which are essential institutions in functional communities. Schools are also communities. Schools are also communities in and of themselves. They should be built based upon a strong sense of community, trust, cooperation, and group accountability. When teachers, children, and parents work together toward group goals, they naturally evolve into a community of interests that they control. When teachers, children, and parents work together toward group goals, they naturally evolve into a community of interest that they control. The design elements for education the design elements for education in the Powernomics plan are very purposeful. This chapter describes how to apply the Powernomics principles of ethno aggregation and vertical integration to education. This plan is intended to foster a love and respect for educational excellence and also provide a framework of self-discipline, a sense of community and racial pride. This framework places a premium on cooperation and harmony and is intended to foster strong and productive alliances between black families, schools, businesses, public offices, civic institutions, and churches as we recreate them through Powernomics. More importantly, Powernomics creates an educational process that is specifically tailored to correct the historical weaknesses of our schools by linking them to a national economic and empowerment, an economic and political empowerment plan. Uh-huh. Yeah, yes, yeah. All right, all right. What does Black America need from its schools? Any plan to empower Black America must have the involvement of Black schools to prepare the human or intellectual capital that we need to carry out the plan. Under the right circumstances, education can empower an individual or a group by conveying knowledge, skills, values, culture, or attitudes. If we are going to effectively deal with the nation's structural inequality and the inappropriate behavior patterns of some blacks, the schools must accept the burden of producing the human capital we need to achieve these critical objectives. Otherwise, we will have the blind leading the blind. Nothing underscores racial inequality of power and wealth more than this nation's education system. The question is, how can schools that are underfunded and ill equipped produce black children that are competitive with white children? We need an education model that meets and serves the specific needs of black children. The test of a model is whether it empowers blacks to compete in political and economic marketplaces. Nothing more, nothing less. Empowering black children is more than teaching them math and reading skills. It is more than preparing them for public sector jobs or high ranking positions in other people's businesses in other people's communities. They must know how to compete for wealth and power rather than poverty and acceptance. To produce rather than consume. Okay. They must know how to compete for wealth and power rather than poverty and acceptance. To produce rather than consume, and to be job producers rather than job seekers. For schools, preparing Black America to compete means removing the chains of inappropriate behavior and teaching them to see, think, and behave anew. The classroom education must be relevant to the real world outside the school. The classroom education must be relevant to the real world outside of the school, and black children should learn more in classrooms than they do in the streets. Black children should learn more in the classrooms than they do in the streets. Black children need schools to teach them how to live a life and earn a living in an increasingly pluralistic and competitive world. Only when schools are able to perform these functions will they be able to close the learning gap between blacks and whites and other ethnic groups. I promise you. I promise you.